All right, staff, we're ready? Okay. Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon, everybody. The time is 1:05. It is March 16, 2023, and I call the planning board meeting to order. We have the following board members with us today. We have Vice Chair Bailey.
Good morning. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, exactly. We have Commissioner Giraldo.
Good afternoon.
And we have Commissioner Dorner.
Hello.
Hello. I'm Chair Shapiro, and please note that the deadline for all participant pre-registration and for all submission of materials and exhibits was 12 noon on the Tuesday before this planning board meeting. Registered speakers may join the meeting with the link provided in the email provided by the planning board office, or listen by phone by utilizing the call-in number provided in the email. And of course, anyone may tune in to watch the planning board meeting via live stream. If you wish to speak or become a person of record, you may use our online web form, which you will see referenced on the screen in front of you. In addition to the commissioners, we are joined by our Deputy Planning Director, Derek Berlage. We have Delisa Coleman, our Senior Counsel, Jessica Jones, our Planning Board Administrator, Joe Parsons, our Senior Technical Hearing Writer, James Hunt, the Division Chief for the Development Review Division, and we have staff members Kenneth Flanagan and Ryan Crown, who are assisting us with technology behind the scenes quite ably, as they always do. Moving on to our first item, we have some resolutions of appreciation. Let me start with Vivian Montgomery. Vivian is Administrative Supervisor with the Commission, Department of Parks and Recreation. She is retiring from the Commission effective March 31st, 2023, after 29 years of service. Vivian earned several promotions throughout her career at the Commission. In addition to her current position, she served in the Arts and Cultural Heritage Division and former History and Sports Divisions. She held the roles of Office Supervisor, Administrative Aide 4, Acting Administrative Aide 4, Administrative Aide 2. She earned numerous performance awards and was instrumental in the success of many, many major programs. So we thank you for all the good work, Ms. Montgomery, and we wish you a happy, healthy retirement. In addition, we have Stuart Seal, Countywide Arts Coordinator in the Special Programs Division of the Department of Parks and Recreation, retiring from the Commission effective March 31st, 2023, after 43 years of service. Stuart earned several promotions and held several management roles throughout his career at the Commission. In addition to his current position, he served in the Arts and Cultural Heritage Division as the Acting Division Chief, as Countywide Arts Program Coordinator, Recreation Class Instructor 6, Arts Specialist 1, and Managing Director and Technical Director of the Public Playhouse. An excellent career of public service for all these years, and thank you as well for all that you've done, and we wish you the same as Ms. Montgomery, a happy and healthy retirement. Before I move on to the last one, Commissioners, anything to add for those kind folks, or should I move on to the next person? Good to go? Okay. Thanks to both of you. This last one is not somebody from our shop, but somebody that we have known for a long time. Terry Shum, the Planning Director with the City of College Park, Maryland, is retiring. She is retiring at the end of the month after 37 years of service in local government, including to the cities of College Park and Bowie. Over the years, Terry reviewed any number of proposed development projects. She testified before us and before the ZHE and County Council on a large number of development applications and proposed legislation over the years. She served on the technical work group for the Prince George's County zoning ordinance rewrite, and she participated on a number of planning committees for various master plans and development plans and sector plans. Just a wonderful career. I've had the opportunity to work with her in all sorts of different roles. When I was at the College Park City University Partnership with the University of Maryland, in this role, she's just done a great job for the City of College Park, City of Bowie, and also for the county. So we wish you well as you enter the next stage with whatever you take on. I'm sure it's going to be equally successful, and I hope you have a happy and healthy retirement as well. So thank you, Terry. And that is it. If there's nothing else to add, folks, we will move on to item 2 on our agenda. I would look for a motion to approve the draft minutes from March 9th, 2022.
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion by Vice Chair Bailey, a second by Commissioner Giraldo. So there's no discussion on the motion. I will call the roll. Vice Chair Bailey.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Giraldo.
I vote aye.
Commissioner Dorner.
Vote aye.
I vote aye as well. The ayes have it 4-0. Next, folks, we're going to go into, hold on one sec. Oh, thank you. Jessica reminded me, we actually need to vote on these resolutions so that they become official. So I would look, thank you for that. I would look for a motion to approve all three resolutions.
Move
Motion
approval.
to approve all three resolutions.
Second.
I've got a motion by Vice Chair Bailey, a second by Commissioner Giraldo. No discussion on the motion. I'll call the roll. Vice Chair Bailey.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Giraldo.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Dorner.
Vote aye.
I vote aye as well. The ayes have it 4-0. Thank you. So now we're looking to go into executive session pursuant to the general provisions article of the Annotated Code of Maryland, Article 3-305, subsection B3. A closed session is proposed to discuss the acquisition of real property for a public purpose and matters related thereto, and for the purpose of protecting the Commission's negotiating position. I would look for a motion to go into executive session.
Motion to go into executive session.
Second.
Motion by Vice Chair Bailey, a second by Commissioner Giraldo. No discussion on the motion. I'll call the roll. Vice Chair Bailey.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Giraldo.
I vote aye.
Commissioner Dorner.
Vote aye.
I vote aye as well. The ayes have it 4-0. So we're going to go into executive session. This should take, for folks in the public, this should take approximately 30 minutes, maybe a bit less. So we will see you back in a bit, and I will see the rest of you in executive session. Thank you.
I hope it's at the top, Jessica. Okay, thank you.
Okay, folks, I believe we are all here and back. We're back out of closed session. Are we recording again, staff? Okay. So we're back at a closed session. I just want to announce that the board did receive briefings related to the matters that I referred to, and direction was given to staff. And let's move on to our next item on the agenda, which is the consent agenda. Is there anyone here who wishes to oppose staff's recommendation item 4B, or is any board member who wishes to discuss these items? Seeing none, I would look for a motion to approve the consent agenda. Everyone's on mute.
Move items on the consent agenda, sir.
Second.
Got a motion by Vice Chair Bailey, a second by Commissioner Giraldo. Any discussion on the motion? I will call the roll. Vice Chair Bailey.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Giraldo.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Dorner.
Vote aye.
I vote aye as well. The ayes have it 4-0. Our next item, first regular agenda item, we have CSP 87128-02, Penn Place 1. This is a request for a continuance to April 6th, 2023 to address some community concerns that were raised during recent community meetings, I understand. Let me turn it over to staff. Mr. Burke will give a brief presentation on that. Mr. Heller may have something to add. I don't think we have anyone else signed up to speak on this outside of folks who are on the applicant's team. Mr. Burke, take it away.
Hi, this is Dominique Lockhart. I'll be standing in for Tom Burke.
Okay, Ms. Lockhart.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Shapiro and members of the Planning Board. For the record, this is Dominique Lockhart with the zoning section. The application before you, listed as item 5 on the agenda, is a request for a continuance for conceptual site plan CSP-87128-02 Penn Place. Provided in your backup is a letter dated March 13th from the applicant's representative, Tom Haller, requesting a continuance to the April 6th Planning Board hearing date. And the letter also waives the 70-day mandatory review period. The continuance is to allow additional time for the applicant to discuss the proposed development with the community. Staff recommends approval of this continuance request, and this concludes staff's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lockhart. We're always happy to hear when there's a need for more community engagement, so it sounds good to me. Commissioners, any questions for staff before I hear from Mr. Haller? Mr. Haller, anything to add?
Nothing really, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak. Thomas Haller on behalf of the applicant. You can see from looking at the aerial photograph that's on your screen right now, there is a residential community directly across the street from this property. And we have met with them and want to continue to have some dialogue with them before we appear before the planning board. And so the purpose of the request is simply to allow for additional community engagement. So we obviously support the request and we appreciate your favorable consideration.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Haller. There's no one else who has any thoughts or reactions to this. Commissioners, I would look for a motion.
Approve the request for continuance,
April 6th,
April 6th.
and the applicant has filed for a waiver to the 70-day requirement.
Thank you. It took two of us to make that motion.
Exactly. Two is better than one.
Teamwork makes the dream work. So we have a motion and by Vice Chair Bailey, a second with an assist on the first from Commissioner Giraldo. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the roll. Vice Chair Bailey,
But I,
Commissioner Giraldo,
I vote aye.
Commissioner Dorner.
Aye.
I vote aye as well. The ayes have it 4-0. Thank you, Ms. Lockhart, and thank you, Mr. Haller.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda, item 6. This is Countywide Planning Division MRF 2022-2022-009 Greater Mount Nebo Solar LLC. We have Ms. Walker who will give a staff presentation. Mr. Haller again represents the applicant. We have folks signed up to speak who are with the applicant's team. And let me turn it over to Ms. Walker for staff presentation.
Good afternoon, Chair Shapiro and members of the Planning Board. For the record, I'm Tania Walker with the Special Projects section. Item 6 is a mandatory referral MRF-2022-009 for Greater Mount Nebo Community Solar. This project proposes the construction of a community solar on 11.4 acres of an 80-acre parcel. All information regarding this mandatory referral has been stated in the staff report, and staff is recommending transmittal to the applicant with recommendations. The applicant is in agreement with all recommendations, and the applicant submitted documents with additional justification for the proposed project prior to the Tuesday 12 p.m. deadline, which are located in the backup materials. And this concludes staff's presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Walker. Questions for staff, commissioners? Let me turn to Mr. Haller if you want to, anything that you want to bring to us on this. We also have Reverend Weaver, you are here as well. Good to see you.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Thomas Haller on behalf of the applicant in this case. And I just wanted to add a small bit of context. I was before you recently on another solar project, which was also done by the same company, Trajectory Solar. We brought that to you in November of 2022. And that was a project at the Poplar Hill property where there was an historic home called His Lordship Kindness. And in that particular instance, Trajectory partnered with the property owner to sensitively locate a solar facility in order to allow for them to be able to protect and to continue to renovate and preserve an historic home. What you have before you is a similar partnership. Trajectory has partnered with Greater Mount Nebo African American Methodist Episcopal Church to construct a solar facility on their property to support a longstanding and well-conceived mission for the church. And so I have several representatives here this morning from both Trajectory as well as from the church. From Trajectory, I have Mr. David Lipowitz, Mr. Clay Elliott, Mr. Dustin Elliott. I also have from the church, Pastor Jonathan Weaver, as well as Reverend Andre Christian and David Johnson, who is a trustee. And we also have representatives of our engineer, Dewberry, as well as Aspen Power, who is a partner with Trajectory on this project. This is a project which is very important to the church's mission, which includes various other future development opportunities to enhance the mission of the church. But I wanted to bring this to the board and to let them know that we have tremendous support from the ownership group as well as from the applicant today. As staff noted, we support the recommendations of staff, and we're happy to answer any questions that the planning board may have.
Thank you, Mr. Haller. Pastor Weaver, anything you want to add? Oh, I see you there on the screen.
Good afternoon, everyone. I certainly appreciate the opportunity to you, Mr. Chair, and also to the other members of the commission. Let me just say that it's already been underscored that in terms of our ability to be able to impact the broader community with this initiative, I'm pleased to have been serving now. This is my 33rd year at Greater Mount Nebo, and I just recognize, along with the officers and the members of the church, the benefit that having this solar farm to impact the community would be something that I think that the county would be well pleased with. So that's why I'm here, just to heartily endorse this initiative.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Commissioners, any questions for the applicant?
I have some questions. So
Commissioner,
I'm looking at, and perhaps this should have been more for staff, with regards to the quality of the soil for farming. Do we know that?
so this question is for staff and or Mr. Haller, members of your team.
Right. Either one.
Yes, that information was contained in the staff report, as well as there's a report in the backup addressing the quality of the soils. I would note that the property has, while it was farmed historically, I believe it was taken out of agricultural production back in 1995 when the church purchased the property. And so it has been designated in the master plan, has been used as an institutional use for approximately almost the last 30 years. So there is no active farming on the property. There are soils which are conducive to farming, but it has not been used for that purpose for several years.
Okay, so I have a concern, and perhaps what we need to relook, Mr. Chair, with regards to the priority or the criteria that we use to evaluate, because I've been seeing more and more of these solar projects going in and taking up good soil that could be used for farming. And then also, I don't see the benefit of a solar project where you're going to get rid of so many acres of trees. That's my concern, especially when there's additional property there where you could put the solar array and not worry about cutting down all these trees. I just have a problem with that, especially since we're trying in every sense to try to maintain as much tree coverage or tree canopy as we can. And even staff recommends that the applicant consider putting the solar array on free property or property that's already disturbed. So I want to know what consideration has been given to that.
So let's hear, perhaps we hear from the applicant first on this, which is why this piece rather than some of the piece that's less forested on the property.
I appreciate an opportunity to respond to it, and perhaps others may chime in as well. But we created a master plan for the property prior to the possibility of having the solar initiative. And that plan, the master plan that was submitted to the county, includes the creation of senior housing and also a sports facility as well on the property, that therefore would preclude our ability to be able to have the solar farm utilizing that other property, as I just mentioned, for those other initiatives that were already a part of our master plan.
Yes, and Mr. Chairman, if I can add to that, when we got involved with church on this project, we took direction from them as to where they wanted us to locate this facility in order to preserve the ability for them to implement their master plan, which predated this facility, part of their overall comprehensive plan. And so we worked with them to locate this facility but we also work to minimize the amount of woodlands that would need to be removed. We also located in an area which wasn't even wooded when the church bought the property. There was an area of the property that was not wooded that had been farmed previously, and over the course of the church's ownership of the property, the area has been allowed to naturally regenerate. And so we were very selective in terms of where we placed the solar facility. With respect to the church's master plan, we were also very careful to design the facility in such a manner that we reduce the amount of potential impact on the woodlands. The supplemental information that we submitted included a letter from the church addressing why the solar facility is placed where it is on the property, as opposed to in areas that are currently not wooded, but which are planned for future church facilities. And we also submitted an analysis from our engineer explaining the extensive efforts that we made to minimize the footprint of the facility so we could disturb as few trees as possible. And that includes constructing a fixed solar panel as opposed to the tilting solar panels in order to reduce the footprint of the solar field to the absolute minimum we possibly could. So we've been very sensitive to this issue from the very beginning, but we have worked very closely with the owner of the property to make sure that we could accommodate this facility as well as the other elements of the master plan for the church.
Thank you. Commissioner Geraldo? Still floor is yours if there's any more you want to get to, Commissioner.
Well, I'm still thinking that we have a strong policy of discouraging locations that result in significant loss of farmland, prime agricultural land, and affect other natural resources. And I just, if there was no other space to put it, but if this solar project is so important, that I think it should be placed on vacant land, not knock down more trees where you have space to do something else. And I don't know when the master plan is going to be put into effect. But I don't know. I just have reservations about it because, one, it's not only trees, but it's also farmland.
Understood. And I don't think you're alone in that sensitivity. I think staff is expressing the same concerns. I guess the question before us is it a reasonable compromise given everything else that is being considered for the site? And I think that's what we have to decide. And where I come down on this is I think it feels like a reasonable compromise. I understand that there's other things that the church will bring to the community that also bring value, and and does this as well. So I hear you, Commissioner Geraldo. Vice Chair Bailey, Commissioner Dorner, I'm curious where you two are with this as well.
I wanted to find out from the applicant, they mentioned that this is going to have a benefit to the, or like a positive impact to the surrounding community. So I want to hear just a little bit more about like how that's supposed to happen.
Maybe we hear from Trajectory Energy Partners. Is there some community solar component of this?
Hi, yes, Chairman Shapiro, thank you. My name is David Lipowitz. I'm a partner and co-founder of Trajectory Energy Partners. The solar project is being developed as a community solar project under a pilot program run by the state of Maryland. Community solar means that we can sell the energy production from the solar project to local community members, homes, churches, schools, businesses, and offer them an opportunity to purchase energy locally from a solar project. The idea behind community solar is that there are a lot of people out there. They might be renters. They, for whatever reason, can't necessarily put solar on their own homes. So community solar is an opportunity to purchase from a solar project if they might not otherwise be able to install it on their own property. And another element of community solar is that we sell the electricity produced by the system at a modest discount to electricity from the utility. So customers of the project will get a savings on their utility bills. And we plan to offer subscriptions and the ability to purchase from the project to members of the local community.
Thank you.
So when you talk about a modest discount, like how much is that? And then are these going to be, if they sign up with your project, are they going to be capped in terms of the rates? So if the rates start to increase and they're not going to increase too much, are you switching them directly over from the primary utility provider, or how is this working?
Yeah, no, good question. So a typical discount might be something in the range of a 5% discount to someone's existing cost of energy from the grid. And it's a fixed discount. So if energy prices go up or down, the customers would always get the same percentage discount. So if energy prices go up, they would technically be saving more. If energy prices go down, their savings would decrease, but the customers are always basically guaranteed a savings. I think that answered. Please let me know if I missed any parts of your question there.
Yeah, I think that helped. So in terms of the local members, where are these people going to be? Are they going to be like in the county? Are they going to be throughout the state? Are they going to be right there next to the site? And how many are we talking about?
Yeah, so under the community solar program, customers one criteria is any customer must also be within BGE's electric service territory, because the Greater Mount Nebo's property is in BGE's territory. We'll be connecting to BGE's grid. So customers must be in BGE's territory. We typically aim to give sort of first priority to people who are local and as close to the project as possible. In the case of the church, we've had discussions about potentially kind of offering to church members as sort of a first opportunity. We would love to kind of offer kind of county residents kind of first priority as well. For us, there's a benefit to, BGE's territory covers a big part of the state, but we think there are benefits to kind of marketing the project locally in terms of customers being more interested in signing up for a project that's kind of closer to home, and just keeping those benefits as local as possible.
All right, so how many people were we talking about?
Yeah, a project of this size can typically serve something in the range of approximately 300 homes if it's kind of a residential sized customer.
Okay, all right, thank you. So I'm asking these questions because I hear what Commissioner Giraldo is saying, and I'm sympathetic to that viewpoint on land that has primarily high agricultural use. So when I hear the kind of the applicant's reasoning of benefiting the surrounding community, 5% for 300 homes on this area seems like a relatively small impact, particularly if it's all the church members. It's like, you're not helping the community, you're helping the church members, you're helping yourselves. You could also put the solar farms on top of the senior aged housing as well, and then you could help those folks that way. So what I'm struggling to see is a real impact that's beneficial to the community, whether or not we're targeting low-income housing or people who are having trouble with their utility bills, not just buying solar. Yeah, it's great to buy green energy, but at the end of the day, whatever costs the least amount is usually what people are going to want to go for when they're struggling to make the ends meet. So from a religious or church perspective, I would think you would want to help out some of the affordable housing or some of the low-income areas around there, and I would encourage you to target that. And I'm kind of at a point where I'm wondering out loud, is solar even the right use for this? Like, if you really truly want to help the community, why not have a garden in this area? If it's agricultural land and you're looking for an impact that's going to be helped by the community, I would invite the applicant to kind of convince us a little bit more how this is not sort of a profit margin on the church just to gain more income, rather than something that's actually benefiting the community, because that's what I'm struggling to kind of see.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I mean, if I could address that, I don't want to leave. Can you hear me all right?
I can, and please continue.
Yeah, I certainly don't want to give the impression that this is a project that would be looking to exclusively or even close to exclusively benefiting members of the church. It's always been our intent to be a benefit to the broader community. Greater Mount Nebo is 147 years old. So we've always been a part of this community and will continue to be that way. And so I would say that clearly, our support and impact would be that we're looking to help support persons and families in the broader community that are in need. Secondly, I would just say that the solar project is just one aspect of the larger vision that we've got for the church. We've already talked about the fact that we want to be able to have senior housing, which of course is still something that is needed in Prince George's County, and certainly an intergenerational family center where we have a variety of athletic projects and programs that would be available again for the community. And so this solar initiative is just another example of a way for us to be able to support the broader community and not just Greater Mount Nebo members of the church.
Thank you, Pastor.
Mr. Chairman, my name is David Johnson. May I speak?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, let me introduce myself for the record. My name is David Johnson. I am a Vice President and General Manager with Honeywell International, and I am a trustee of Greater Mount Nebo AME Church.
Hold on one second. Wait,
Yes, sir.
before you continue, hold on one second. I don't, unless I'm missing it, I actually don't see you having signed up to speak for this.
I was introduced, my name was introduced when they gave the list of those who were applicants to give.
Yeah, but we're quite strict about people who speak have to have registered in, no disrespect, but folks who speak have to be registered in advance, and that's a hard and fast rule for us.
I clearly
So I don't-
understand.
So let me ask you, I'm sure Pastor Weaver or somebody else who is registered could speak, communicate what you have, but I'm going to have to ask you to stop.
And I appreciate that. Thank you.
All right, thank you, sir. Vice Chair Bailey, I'm curious where you are on this. I have the concern. By the way, I have the concerns that you have, Commissioner Giraldo, Commissioner Dorner. I feel like the benefits outweigh the detriments on this, and it's part of a bigger plan. But I'm curious where you are, Vice Chair Bailey, and I'm not sure where we're going to land on this with the four of us.
Well, I think the very first recommendation that we have on our backup speaks to whether or not the applicant will consider relocating. It is a recommendation, and I do believe that they will look at that and see if there are any other alternatives. I think the benefits far outweigh in a negative aspect, regardless, even if they maintain this particular site. But I also believe that they will look strongly and see if there are any other opportunities.
Reverend Andre Christian requesting permission to share additional thoughts on behalf of Greater Mount Nebo.
I'm sorry, who is it?
Who is
Reverend
speaking?
Reverend Andre Christian.
Oh, yes, you are sounded to speak, Reverend, and please come in. Please jump in.
Just very briefly, and Pastor Weaver has already shared a little bit about the larger vision impact for our community. I do want to share that additionally, there are plans for a community garden that is going to be on the property that will also be used by part of the land that also has been cleared. That will then be something that the community come in, and that'll be our part to help the environment, provide fresh food for those that need it. In addition, the longer term plan of the sports facility, the Family Life Center, as well as the housing, are options for solar panels on the roof. We're just not there yet. And so this is really a start to the larger vision that will not only temporarily provide some additional funding sources for the church to move those along, but as well as Pastor Weaver said, this is really trying to provide cheaper, lower cost energy usage in an environment where costs are very high, rising. And so this again is our part in order to help our community.
Thank you. Thank you, Pastor. I appreciate that. Commissioners, other thoughts, questions?
I'd like to hear them directly address number one. We've talked about it, about the recommendation number one in the staff report. We raised concerns, and I would like to hear Mr. Haller or the applicant address that. And then to some extent, I would also like to just know in general, I think Pastor Weaver, I apologize, I don't know if it's Pastor Weaver or Reverend Weaver, but if one of you could also just talk about, or maybe proffer or something to some extent, just giving us a little bit more info on how you would use this to potentially benefit the community. Like you mentioned wanting to help out folks who are in need around the surrounding area. If that ends up being part of like the business plan or kind of the outreach, where you would give those discounts specifically to folks who are income constrained or who are in the surrounding area, like close to that area, I think that would make me feel a little bit more confident in terms of like the statements about benefiting the surrounding community.
David, I don't know if you-
I'm sorry. Let me jump in first, Pastor Weaver, real quick, just in response to Commissioner Durner's question, and that is why we truly understand the guidelines that the planning board has adopted with regard to solar facilities and siting considerations. We are putting this property in an area, this facility in an area of the property that's not farmed, but we are providing the pollinator species in order to, in accordance with the guidelines, to have a dual use for the property, even though we aren't removing any agricultural area from the property. But the other element of it is that we have, in response to the guidelines, taken the concerns about removing trees very seriously. And as we discussed earlier, the property does have an old approved tree conservation plan that at the time it was approved many years ago, the property had far less woods on it than it does today. So we're trying to locate the facility in an area where we're removing newer woodland, which is considered to have less value, and we're reducing the footprint of the facility by about 3 acres over what you would normally see in order to minimize woodland impact. So our approach for addressing the staff's concern, which outlines the board's policy, is to really drill down as much as we can to reduce tree impact and woodland impact as much as possible, while at the same time honoring the concerns of the church to maintain areas to implement their master plan, which they have done a good job of outlining for you, which includes a lot of community benefits, including a community garden. So I'll pass it off to you, Pastor Weaver, as well.
Well, just a couple of other quick observations in terms of our impact, in terms of outreach ministry. Every year since I've been here, we are providing support for apartment dwellers that may be struggling with their rent, and even for those that are in homes struggling with their mortgage. We have literally provided hundreds of thousands of dollars over the years to be able to help people stay in their apartment and also stay in their homes. And also, we've covered utility bills in the past. Tens of thousands of dollars every year to support persons outside of the church family. And even with the intent of having the urban garden, our intent is also to be able to provide education for young people so that they will learn really that the food is not coming from a giant or Whole Foods, but it's coming directly from the ground. So it's a teaching proposition. And then added to that, we are constantly going to be looking for organizations, nonprofit organizations, such as homeless shelters that are providing support for persons in and around our area with fresh food that would come from the urban garden. So that's a major, major emphasis for us, is to be able to try to provide support for people that are hurting, that are marginalized. And certainly our ability through the solar farm would help us in that regard.
And this is David Lipowitz from Trajectory Energy. I do want to say that absolutely we do plan to make it a priority in terms of our outreach to potential customers to find people for whom the utility bill savings will be most impactful. So that's definitely part of the mission here, and I think really kind of part of the overall goals the state of Maryland has for community solar is to have community solar projects be a way to kind of target residents that have the greatest need in terms of savings on their utility bills. You said a big element of it is it allows people who don't maybe have the ability to pay up front for solar panels on the roof of their home, or maybe they live in an apartment or they're a renter. That's a big part of the vision for the project and how we intend to proceed.
Thank you. All right, so commissioners, if there's no one else who signed up to speak on this, the staff recommendation is to transmit the recommendation to the applicant with the conditions as laid out on the page 13 of the staff report. One of them is the applicant is strongly encouraged to consider relocating the solar array to the open non-wooded area of the site. If woodland clearing cannot be avoided, the entire woodland conservation requirement should be met on site. So that is the staff recommendation for what we would be transmitting. Again, I hear the concerns. I'm comfortable with this, with the staff recommendations. I'm not sure there's a whole lot of benefit from delaying our decision on this. So, given that, unless there's further discussion we have, I would look for a motion for staff's recommendation.
Mr. Chairman, I am also very comfortable with the staff recommendation too. So I move that we support the staff recommendation to transmit recommendations to the applicant.
Is there a second?
I'll second it so we can have a vote.
Say again?
I'll second it so we can have a vote and discussion.
Okay, all right. So we have a motion by Vice Chair Bailey, a second by Commissioner Joyner, and we are under discussion. Any discussion on the motion?
Well, yeah, we have, I'm just not convinced that it can't be put somewhere else, but so if it can't be put somewhere else, and nor do I know enough about this master plan, when this master plan is going to be fully implemented. And in the meantime, we're going to be cutting down all these trees. But if in fact they go with the staff recommendation, what I would like to know is if the entire, does the applicant intend to have the entire woodland conservation requirement be met on site?
Mr. Giraldo,
We're still in discussion, but let me ask Mr. Haller if she can weigh in on that to help educate us.
We are working with the church to try to figure out how to satisfy the tree conservation requirements. There are obviously impacts from both satisfying the requirements on site as well as trying to satisfy requirements off site. And so our plan is to work with the church as well as with your staff to come up with an appropriate balance, understanding the concerns that the board has as are expressed in the guidelines. We haven't filed a determination on that yet because we're not quite there yet.
Mr. Chairman, I hesitate to make a comment, but this particular comment, because I do know this church very well, and I do know their community service very well, and I do know that within this church, there not only the pastor, but there are individuals whose concern is strongly within the community, and they've demonstrated that over and over again. I hesitate because it certainly should not impact what decision I make regarding this particular application. But with the way the discussion is going, I certainly do want to add that I do know from a personal standpoint, this particular church, and feel that they will respond to the concerns, not just to the citizens, the individuals who attend their church, but to the community at large, which is what they've consistently done in the past.
Thank you. And commissioners, I would associate myself with Vice Chair Bailey's remarks. And this church has just a long history of doing right by the community. And I understand it's a complicated issue. I get it.
Mr. Chair, I'm well familiar with Reverend Weaver and his church, and that's not so much my issue. There's no question whatsoever that Greater Mount Nebo does a wonderful job of extending out to the community and helping those in need. That's not my issue. But I just want to know, and I want the applicant to know, that the idea of taking prime woodland, trees, forested areas to put up a solar farm is like counterproductive. On one hand, you're removing something that God has given us to remove carbon out of the air to replace it with the solar system. So that's and then I have to follow, respect the findings and discussion by our own staff. But I will go with the staff recommendation.
Yeah, I'll just add in, dovetailing on that it does seem a little bit contradictory in ways. But I think that might be part of our fault on the guidelines that we have. We haven't revisited them in a while. And Mr. Haller's mentioned he's following the guidelines. And it's like, well, yeah, if we put down certain rules and we don't revisit them and revise them as we kind of learn from them in terms of what works and what doesn't work, or what we wanted to incentivize versus not incentivize, we're a product of our own error if we don't actually go back and kind of fix things that we don't like how they're working necessarily. Like I've been wanting for a while.
Good point.
Livestock, like walking underneath some of these solar farms and stuff. And I think Mr. Haller had one of the first cases that I asked him about that. And I mentioned a lot of the herbaceous cover and the pollinator plants, and he's responded extremely well in the cases that he's brought before us with solar farms to providing that. Something that I did not know really well until today, that the members of the church have spoken to is this plan, is the community plan. And that didn't come through in the staff report really well, in terms of like the broader kind of view of that. And I think that to me sways me more in favor of the project, knowing that it might be difficult to recite it on the unoccupied areas that are kind of the open space, because that's probably going to be either for the senior age housing or maybe the sports field that you're playing in. And knowing kind of the greater plan of what's happening, I think helps kind of guide me to that, because I can see the sort of bigger picture of like how you're trying to benefit the community, which I don't think you expressed at the very beginning. I don't think it was totally clear, at least to me, in how that was helping. But the remarks today, I think, helped get me a little bit more convinced. Well, I shouldn't say a little more convinced. It would provide more clarity in that, and I definitely appreciate the multi thronged approach to helping the community with the community garden, the urban garden kind of aspect, and the education. Really, that's something that, yeah, you can build a garden, but if you don't teach people about the benefits of that, you're not actually like teaching them how to fish, right? And that's one of the stories that we try and talk about a lot. So I think I'm in favor of this project at this point. But I would send the message to staff that, hey, when we start to review these, it would probably be good to revisit the guidelines that we had a long time ago, especially for Chair here, who hasn't even seen them, potentially in their full extent, to see if we want to fix things. Because I think this application is technically following the guidelines, and if we're not happy with that, we just need to fix them later on.
I appreciate that, Commissioner. I would associate myself. Hold on one second, Sprint. I associate myself with those remarks, and I think we can direct staff to take this up and to reconsider the guidelines, figure out how they're working, and to work with us on that as well, because clearly there's a lot of energy around this. Mr. Ray.
And Mr. Chair, the history with this is when we first considered the guidelines for several years ago, and one of the things that I thought we can consider is, if you're going to use these solar panels and you're taking up good soil, and they've done this in other states, that they put the solar panels up, but they also they put the panels up high enough that you can actually grow vegetables and have gardens and even have livestock. But at that time, the vote was to just put the herbaceous, but I don't see why especially with good soil, why we can't put the guideline in that you have to, other than just having herbaceous flowers, to also allow gardening, lettuce, tomatoes, potatoes, what have you. which is done in other states. So I just don't understand why we can't do that here.
So I hear you loud and clear. Let's take this issue up. I suggest we don't take it up with this case, but let's
No.
take this issue up and work with staff on it. Mr. Ray?
Chairman, yes, thank you. I just wanted to chime in and say the mandatory referral guidelines are definitely on our radar, and we are in the process of doing updates to those, working with legal staff. And of course, the solar guidelines are an important integral part of that. And we are aware of all of the changes, the technology and various other alternatives that have come up since those guidelines were first discussed. So we are in the process of looking at them and are more than happy to work with the board going forward.
Thank you for that. And I see Ms. Schollers nodding her head as well. So it sounds like we're aligned around that. And Pastor Weaver, I didn't want to make sure you had too strong a reaction to the suggestion that you have livestock at the church as well. So I think.
No, I tried to control my facial expressions.
Not well enough. I saw the reaction.
But you could have them at Christmas time.
Well,
And we do have a motion.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. We are under discussion on a motion, so let's stop all of this. And the motion is to approve staff's recommendation. And staff, you've heard our direction around the revisiting of the guidelines, which sounds like this work you're doing anyhow. So if there's no further discussion on this, I will call the roll. Vice Chair Bailey.
But I.
Commissioner Joyner.
But I.
Commissioner Giraldo.
Vote aye.
I vote aye as well. The ayes have it 4-0. Thank you, everybody. I think you've heard us loud and clear, and we look forward to hearing how this project progresses.
thank you very much.
Commissioners, do we need a break?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, no.
Short break, 10 minutes?
10 minutes.
Could we,
It's
okay.
2:50. We'll see you back at 3 o'clock.
Just point of order, you did a pretty good job.
Commissioner Giraldo, for a second there, I thought you had a standing desk. Oh, you're on mute.
He lost his chair when he stood up yelling in happiness about the UMD, so he doesn't have a chair anymore.
That's right. Look at that. Maryland won. While we were doing business, Maryland won.
That's right. But I was wondering if, Howard University plays
Kansas?
at 2 o'clock. I don't want to see that score.
All right, folks, we are back from our quick break. We are on to item 7 on our agenda. Item 7 is a preliminary plan of subdivision 4-22006 Highsville Bright Seat Road. We have Mr. Haller, who will be representing the applicant. We have Mr. Heath, who will give a staff presentation. And this is an evidentiary hearing, so that let me swear folks in who will be testifying. The planning board will be conducting an evidentiary hearing in this case, requiring those intending to provide testimony to take an oath. So, Mr. Haller, this is not for you, but if there are any other members of your team, we have nobody from the public who signed up to speak, so any other members of your team will be speaking. I will ask those people to come online so we can see them. Don't have to.
Yes, I had
but it's
two people who may speak. I have Mara Gansert with Bowler Engineering and Mr. Jason Donald with Pentex Ventures.
okay. If you both could come online, we may or may not hear from you, but just for our formality. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that your testimony will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
I hear a yes and a yes. Okay, thank you all very much. So with that, let me turn back to Mr. Heath for the staff presentation. And then we'll hear from the applicant. Mr. Heath. You're on mute, Mr. Heath. Well, you're not on mute, but we can't hear you. Still can't hear you, Mr. Heath, sorry.
Mr. Chairman, if you'd like, we can go to the next case just in the event that we can fix Mr. Heath's audio issues, or tech issues, I should say.
Mr. Haller, is that okay with you? The next case should be quick. Oh, Mr. Heath, we can hear you now. Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. All right.
Take it
Good
away.
afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the board. For the record, Antoine Heath with the subdivision section. Item 7 is a preliminary plan of subdivision 4-22006 Hyattsville Bright Seat Road, which proposes commercial development. The applicant submitted additional information prior to the Tuesday 12 p.m. deadline, which includes a proposed revision to condition 6. This can be found in the additional backup as applicant's exhibit 1. The details of the topics offered in this exhibit will be discussed during the presentation. This application is supported by and subject to Certificate of Adequacy ADQ 2022037, which was approved with conditions on March 7, 2023. Slide 2, please. The site is located in central Prince George's County within Planning Area 72 and Council District 5. Next slide, please. More specifically, the subject property is located in the northeast quadrant of the intersection of Medical Center Drive and Bright Seat Road. Slide 4, please. In accordance with the current zoning ordinance, the subject site is located in the industrial employment zone. The surrounding zones are the regional transit-oriented high-intensity edge and the regional transit-oriented high-intensity core zones. However, this application was reviewed in accordance with the prior zoning ordinance and subdivision regulations, and the prior county zoning ordinance. The subject site is classified within the planned industrial employment park zone. The surrounding zones are the mixed-use transportation-oriented and commercial office zones. Next slide, please. This aerial photograph shows the site in context with the surrounding properties. An existing hotel that is to remain can be seen on the eastern portion of the site. The surrounding properties consist of commercial development, institutional development, and vacant land. Next slide, please. The site map shows the topography, which slopes downhill toward the southwest corner of the property. Next slide, please. This slide shows the locations of the abutting master plan rights of way. Next slide, please. This is a closer look at the site and its current condition. The surrounding development as described in the aerial map slide can be seen as well. Next slide, please. The preliminary plan proposes 2 parcels for the development of 51,674 square feet of commercial development, 47,624 square feet of which is an existing hotel. The overall property boundary and parcels are outlined in red, with the existing rights-of-way highlighted in blue. The proposed parcel on the western side of the property will not have direct vehicular access to Bright Seat Road, and instead will be accessed via the existing driveway on site currently used to access the hotel. The shared access easement will be required. The applicant submitted proposed revisions to condition 6B to provide a minimum 5.5-foot sidewalk along the perimeter of the building instead of a 6-foot sidewalk, in accordance with the conditions of CSP 21006, which was recently approved. And staff is in agreement with the proposed revision. The Subregion 4 Master Plan recommends that a bike lane or side path be provided along Medical Center Drive, which abuts the property to the south. The master plan recommendations have been met as there is an existing side path on the opposite side of the street along Medical Center Drive that pedestrians and cyclists can use. There is also an existing crosswalk that connects the subject property to the side path. Staff's bike and ped recommendations include a bike lane and sidewalk along the frontage of Bright Seat Road in accordance with the master plan of transportation. The sidewalk along Bright Seat Road is already existing. An existing sidewalk along the driveway to the hotel connects to frontage improvements along Bright Seat Road as well. Details on these facilities, as well as the additional on-site pedestrian facilities, will be reviewed at the time of detailed site plan. Next slide, please. Type 1 tree conservation plan was submitted with this application. There are no regulated environmental features on site. There are 0.60 acres of existing woodlands along the property's northern boundary that will be preserved. And this area is highlighted in green. Next slide, please. Staff recommends the planning board adopt the findings and approve preliminary plan of subdivision 4-22006, TCP 1003-202301, subject to the 7 conditions in the staff report, as well as the revisions to conditions and applicant's exhibit 1. This concludes staff's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Heath. Commissioners, questions for staff? First of all, let me say, you heard us when we heard this before about our concerns around bike path improvements, and I appreciate the work that you did and work with the applicant to address, to hear us and to take that into consideration. So I'm thankful for that. Commissioners, questions for staff? No? Mr. Howard?
Again, good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Thomas Haller, attorney with offices in Largo on behalf of the applicant, Hyattsville Bright Seat Road, RELLC. As you noted, we were before you on March the 2nd for the CSP hearing. And just to remind the planning board, this property that's in front of you today was the subject of a special exception application that was filed prior to the implementation of the new zoning ordinance. It was approved in July of last year, and the application was submitted under the prior zoning, the I3 zone. And so we are completing the necessary development approvals required to allow for the project to proceed. And because the property was in the I3 zone, it required approval of a conceptual site plan, which you heard 2 weeks ago. And in this application, which is a preliminary plan of subdivision, you will also see a detailed site plan in the near future. But the purpose of this preliminary plan of subdivision is simply to take the larger 5.3 acre site and to carve off the 2 acre site that was approved, that had the special exception approved for the convenience store with gas facility, to allow that to be conveyed as a separate parcel of land. So the overall subdivision of the property, the road network and whatnot were generally addressed when the hotel site was approved back in 2016. And this application merely allows for the site where the convenience store and gas facility will be constructed to be carved out. We concur with the staff's recommendations and the staff's recommended conditions with the one modification that we submitted. I do want to note, and just in case there's any confusion, in the staff report, there was a missing condition. Condition 5 was actually missing, so it went 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, and 7. And so when we submitted our proposed revision, we just made it 5 and 6. So Mr. Heath referenced an amendment to condition 6B, which is what is shown on our conditions. It's actually 7B in the staff report conditions, but you'll note that there's a missing condition. So I would assume that the conditions would be renumbered to be in sequence. But other than that, we concur with staff's recommended conditions and be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, Mr. Howard. Mr. Heath, any issues around the technical correction around the numbering of the conditions?
I'm looking at the staff report. I'm looking at the staff report right now. You were saying there was a number that was skipped in the conditions.
Yes, if you look at page 15 of the staff report, it says condition 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you go to the top of the next page and there's no 5.
I see a 5 in my staff report, Mr.
Yeah, I see 5 on the report I'm looking at.
Okay.
Any residential development of the subject property shall require approval of a new preliminary plan of subdivision prior to issuance of any permits.
Well, then whenever I printed mine off, somehow the numbering got messed up because that condition is 6 under mine. But anyway, I numbered them as 5 and 6 in my proposed revision, so it would be consistent with what you're looking at, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Commissioners, there's no questions for staff. Well, and nothing for any questions for Mr. Haller, actually? No questions. There's nobody who signed up to speak on this, correct? Do we need to hear from any of the other, Mr. Haller? Yeah.
No, there's just members of our team, and unless the board has any questions, they have no reason to speak.
Okay. All right. If there's no questions, folks, there's no one else to speak on this. I would close the hearing. And commissioners, what is your pleasure? Commissioner Geraldo, you're on mute.
So I'll go ahead and say that I make a motion since the others are not. I was hoping that I wouldn't have to do this because they're so good at it, but I'll move that we accept the staff along with the staff report, and we approve the preliminary plan of subdivision 4-22006, and then we also approve type 1 tree conservation plan TCP 1-003-2023-01 as outlined today in the hearing, and is provided with staff recommendations as modified under applicant exhibit 1.
Second.
Thank you. We've got a motion by Commissioner Dorner, a second by Commissioner Geraldo. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I will call the roll. Commissioner Dorner.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Geraldo.
Vote aye.
Vice Chair Bailey. You're still on mute. Give me a thumbs up. Oh, there we go.
Say aye.
Okay, we got an aye. I'll say aye as well. The ayes have it 4-0. Thank you, Mr. Haller. I think, Mr. Haller, we're done with you for the day. Is that correct?
Yes, you are. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. Much appreciated. Mr. Heath, thank you as well. Not that it wasn't a pleasure, Mr. Haller, but have a good day.
As always.
We'll move on to item 8 on our agenda. This is DSP 21032-5801 Arbor Street property. This is continued from the January 26, 2023 Planning Board meeting. We have Mr. Burke, or is it Ms. Lockhart? We have Ms. Lockhart, who will give the staff presentation. We have Mr. Foreman, who represents the applicant. This also is an evidentiary hearing. So those intending to provide testimony separate from the attorney.
This is not an evidentiary hearing. This is a continuance.
It's a continuance, Mr. Chair.
Is this a request for continuance?
I believe so.
I thought this was a continuance from before.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I'm sorry. Sorry for the record, James Hunt. Well, the applicant did request a continuance before, and they're requesting another continuance at this point in time as well to have further conversations with the city of Cheverly, I believe.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't read my own notes. Okay, I see it here right now. So this case, the request is to continue this case until April 27, 2023. Let's hear briefly from Ms. Lockhart. And thank you for helping me, everybody.
Okay, good afternoon, Chair Shapiro and members of the Planning Board. For the record, this is Dominique Lockhart with the zoning section. The application before you, item 8 on the agenda, is for DSP 21032-5801 Arbor Street property. Provided in your backup is a letter dated March 2nd from the applicant's representative, Nathaniel Foreman, requesting a continuance to the April 27th Planning Board hearing date. The continuance is to allow time for the applicant to review the recommendations from the town of Cheverly. Staff recommends approval of this continuance, and this concludes staff's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lockhart. Mr. Foreman, anything to add?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the board. This is Nate Foreman with O'Malley, Miles, Nyland, and Gilmore. We are in agreement with staff's recommendation of approval for the continuance and look forward to presenting before the board in April.
Thank you, Mr. Foreman. So with that, commissioners, I would look for a motion.
Mr. Chair, let me see if I'm I move that we approve the continuance from today to April 27th in DSP 21032.
Second, request for continuance.
Got a motion, second motion by Commissioner Geraldo, second by Vice Chair Bailey. Any discussion of the motion? Not, I'll call the roll. Commissioner Geraldo.
I vote aye.
Vice Chair Bailey.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Dorner.
Vote aye.
I'll vote aye as well. The ayes have it 4-0. Thank you, Mr. Foreman. Thank you, Ms. Lockhart.
Thank you very much.
Next, we are on item 9. We're going to do 10 first. Folks, we're going to switch it around a little bit. We're going to take item 10 first. We'll end with item 9. So item 10 is preliminary plan of subdivision 4-22004 Library Apartments. This was continued from February 23, 2023. We have Mr. Heath who will give the staff presentation. We have Mr. Tedesco who's representing the applicant. This is an evidentiary hearing. So the planning board, in this case, will be requiring those intending to provide testimony to take an oath. So separate from Mr. Tedesco, do you have anyone else who you want to come on to take the oath?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman.
Cancer?
Yeah, we have a few people with us this afternoon. I've asked them to please queue up and take the oath.
Ms. Coleman, we also have representatives from the city of Hyattsville. Am I asking them to take the oath as well?
Yes, Chair.
Okay, so Mr. Chandler, Ms. Simmons, if you're on the line.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Okay, great. All right, if all of you could raise your right hand, and do you solemnly swear or affirm that your testimony will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, consider you're all sworn in. Now we'll turn to staff, Mr. Heath, for staff presentation, then we'll hear from Mr. Tedesco.
Can you hear me now this time?
We can hear you fine.
All right, thank you. All right. Good afternoon again, Mr. Chair, members of the board. For the record, Antoine Heath with the subdivision section. Item 10 is a preliminary plan of subdivision for 4-22004 Library Apartments, which proposes residential development in addition to an existing parking garage. The applicant submitted additional information prior to the Tuesday 12 p.m. deadline, which includes proposed revisions to a finding and condition 11. This can be found in the additional backup as applicant's exhibit 1. The details of the topics offered in this exhibit will be discussed during the presentation. This application is supported by and subject to Certificate of Adequacy ADQ 2022055, which was approved with conditions on March 7, 2023. Slide 2, please. Site is located in western Prince George's County within Planning Area 68 and Council District 2. Next slide, please. More specifically, the subject property is located on the south side of Toledo Road, approximately 265 feet west of Adelphi Road. Next slide, please. In accordance with the current county zoning ordinance, the subject site is located in the regional transit-oriented high-intensity core zone. The surrounding zones are the residential single-family 65, regional transit-oriented high-intensity edge, and agricultural preservation zones. This application was reviewed in accordance with the prior zoning ordinance and subdivision regulations, and the prior ordinance and regulations. And the prior
Mr.
zoning
Heath, we
ordinance
lost.
and regulations.
There we go.
All right.
Keep going.
In the prior county ordinance, the subject site is classified within the mixed-use transportation-oriented zone. The surrounding zones are the mixed-use infill, one-family detached residential, and open space zones. Next slide, please. Under the prior county zoning ordinance, the entire site is located within the Prince George's County Plaza Transit District Development Plan and Transit District Overlay. Next slide, please. This aerial photograph shows the site in context with the surrounding improvements, surrounding properties. The site consists of an existing parking garage, half of which is to be demolished to provide space for the proposed multifamily development. The multifamily development is proposed to be located on the eastern half of the property. The surrounding properties consist of commercial, multifamily, and institutional development. Next slide, please. This site map shows the topography of the site, which slopes downhill toward the north. Slide 8, please. This slide shows the locations of the abutting and adjacent master plan rights of way. Next slide, please. This is a closer look at the site and its current condition. The surrounding development as described in the aerial map slide can be seen as well. Next slide, please. The preliminary plan proposes one parcel for the development of 209 multifamily dwelling units. The overall property boundary is outlined in red, with the existing rights-of-way highlighted in blue. Vehicular access to the site is proposed from an existing driveway on the western half of the property. This location of this driveway is marked with a blue arrow on the screen. This driveway will access the half of the garage still remaining. The subject site includes an existing driveway on the eastern side of the property known as Democracy Avenue. This driveway has an ingress and egress easement over it, which is highlighted in yellow. This driveway currently serves as a vehicular access to the eastern half of the garage, which is to be demolished. This portion of Democracy Avenue must be designed as a street or promenade to conform to the standards of the TDDP at the time of detailed site plan. The applicant provided proposed revisions to condition 11B, which can be found in the additional backup as applicant's Exhibit 1. The provided language acknowledges the applicant's ability to file an amendment to design standards at the time of detailed site plan, and staff is in agreement with the proposed revision. Exhibit 1 also contains proposed revisions to the Parks and Recreation findings to remove reference of a pool, as this is an error, and staff is in agreement with the revision. The City of Hyattsville recommended 9 conditions, which are discussed on pages 17 through 21 of the staff report. These conditions were not carried forward as they are either already consistent with staff's conditions in the staff report or certificate of adequacy, or more appropriate to be addressed at the time of detailed site plan. Next slide, please. The Type 1 tree conservation plan was submitted with this application. No woodlands exist on site. Regulated environmental features known as primary management area are outlined in green, a green dashed line. The development in the northeast corner of the site will impact that PMA area. However, these impacts are already existing from previous development. Next slide, please. Staff recommends the planning board adopt the findings and approve preliminary plan of subdivision 4-22004 and TCP 1007203, subject to the 11 conditions in staff's report, as well as the revisions to findings and conditions in applicant's Exhibit 1. This concludes staff's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Heath. Commissioners, questions for staff before we turn to the applicant? No questions? Okay, thank you, Mr. Heath. Mr. Tedesco, the floor is yours. You may want to introduce the members of your team and take it away.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon to you and to members of the planning board. For the record, Matthew Tedesco, on behalf of the owner and applicant of Parcel H, which is the Bernstein Companies, represented here this afternoon by Mr. Dave Thaxton and Phil Aftuck. Also with us from Bowler Engineering, who's the civil engineers for the project, we have Mira Gansert. From Lenhart Traffic and Consulting, Mr. Mike Lenhart. And although this is a preliminary plan of subdivision, we do have our architects joining us this afternoon as well, represented by Mr. Stephen Varenhorst and Elin Nguyen. Mr. Chairman, I do want to start off. I'll try to be brief. It feels like it's been a long day, but we only started at 1. But I want to thank Mr. Heath, Ms. Connor, and Mr. Ryan for their review of this application. We've worked very closely with them in particular on this project, as well as Mr. Chandler and Ms. Simmons at the city with respect to this particular project. You will recall that we did continue this case just to give everyone a little bit more time to continue to work through some of the items of discussion. No real major issues, just items of discussion as far as, some certain things that each of the disciplines may have been looking for with respect to this particular project, a lot of which will frame the detailed site plan. But nevertheless, I do want to publicly thank all of them for their review of this particular application, and certainly for Mr. Heath, Ms. Connor for their staff report, which we are in agreement with the additional modifications, very minor modifications in applicant's Exhibit 1. I also just wanted to note for your edification that this owner applicant, the Bernstein Companies, as well as this development team, are the same team and same owners that successfully converted the Metro 2 office building, which is towards the bottom middle of your screen with the white roof behind the Safeway. And I know all the planning board commissioners are very familiar with the University Town Center. The Metro 2 office building was one of 2 high-rise vacant office buildings in the county. It is one of 2 successfully converted vacant office buildings in the county, high-rise vacant office buildings converted to a multifamily known as the Highline Apartments. Immensely successful project repurposing of that building. So our client challenged the team once again to do something that really isn't customary and take a look at this parking garage, which is on parcel H, known as Garage A, in the town center. It is very much underutilized. I was trying to think of a good adjective, but it is significantly underutilized, notwithstanding the development in and around the town center. You can tell just from this aerial photograph and going back all the aerial photographs, in fact, there's no cars ever on the top decks. There's hardly any cars once you get past the first 2 decks. It is a 5-story parking garage. It has existed for some time. It's owned by the Bernstein Companies. So we were tasked with, and primarily the design team, the engineers and the architects, to, how can we repurpose this underutilized structure? And it has a couple of things going for it, which allows us to basically raise half of the garage by keeping the speed ramps on the other half and the parking structure in place to repurpose this garage, which is in keeping with a whole lot of policies, goals, strategies within the TDDP, as well as within Plan 2035. And so that's what we did. And so this is the first application, ultimately will be before you with a detailed site plan, to repurpose this garage to maintain half of it, the western half, and then raise and rebuild the eastern half. And a lot of different reasons for that we can get into with the detailed site plan, but on it, the eastern half being adjacent to the new library is an amenity feature. Having residential on that side made a lot of sense to act as a transition from that library, which is brand new and very successfully used. So, Plan 2035, as you all know, designated 8 locations in the county, including Prince George's Plaza, as a regional transit district. The TDDP that Mr. Heath referenced further amended Plan 2035 and the boundaries of Prince George's Plaza Regional Transit District to include all of the properties within the TDOZ, the Transit Development Overlay Zone. The centers were selected based on a quantitative analysis of 31 indicators that assess the capacity and potential of each center to support future growth and development. In that analysis, the Prince George's Plaza scored the highest of any other center in the county. Therefore, this area is envisioned to have high-density regional serving centers. So we believe by repurposing this garage, reducing the parking, but still providing and having more than sufficient parking to serve not only the development, but really the town center as a whole, made all the sense in the world. So I want to applaud the applicant and the owner for taking on such a unique project, but one that's been very well received and supported by the community at large. With that, Mr. Chairman, we really don't have much more to add other than just to say that we believe that this project further ensures the realization of the policies and initiatives within the Transit Development District Plan that promote less parking, walkability, transit orientation, mixed-use development within the transit district. This project, like so many in the area, will further transform the Prince George's Plaza Metro Station and auto-oriented Maryland 410 corridor by integrating and connecting the Metro Station with more higher residential density and mixed-use development. It truly is a transformative project. And again, I will close by just once again thanking staff for their recommendations, their review, as well as Mr. Chandler and Ms. Simmons for their review. And we continue to look forward to working with them on some of the more detailed items that will come up with detailed site plan as referenced in your staff report in response to the proposed conditions that the staff had requested. With that, Mr. Chair, I will conclude and thank you for your time and happy to answer any questions or respond to anything that may come up during discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tedesco. Commissioners, any questions for Mr. Tedesco or members of his team?
Yeah, I have a couple for him. I'll start out with a tongue-in-cheek one. So are we getting the tunnel where the bridge is going to connect over to the library?
I was wondering if that was going to be remembered from last week, Commissioner Joyner. No, unfortunately, no tunnel, but plenty of sidewalk connectivity.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, couldn't let that slip from you. Yeah, and I'll say great job at Metro 2. that was a completely vacant building for a while, and I went by it a lot and watched it kind of go up and get renovated, and they did a great job on the renovation of that. I think one of the aspects of why you don't have much utilization on that parking garage where you're looking at right now is just because there's not much around there yet, but there hopefully will be in the not too distant future. And kind of eyeing that there's going to be a whole lot more density in that area. And then we're also going to have a multi-gen facility on the parcel across the street from there. One of the things that I'm keen on is connecting things that are not connected or that are just like right there and are like on the edge, we just need to go that next step further. So in the BPIS requirements or sort of the things that you're looking at right now, one of the things that I want to point out two things too. At the intersection of Toledo and Adelphi, which you can kind of see on the map right there, just to the right of the kind of drawing at the moment on the slides, the north side of that intersection is not painted yet in a crosswalk. And we have the south side and we have the west side of that intersection painted the crosswalks. I don't know if it's the Dewey property that has that in their kind of recommendations that they have to actually comply with that. But I would like you to look into that and see whether or not that would be one of the things to do, because that's right there in the vicinity of your application site, as opposed to doing crosswalks that are up by like Northwestern. As much as I would like to see that happen, I want to make sure that we get stuff done that's near here, if that's not conditioned on other approvals. And then the other thing about that is at that same intersection on sort of the southeast corner of that.
Commissioner, I wonder if we might want to take, because I imagine you have a few of these. I wonder if we want to take them up one at a time and hear from the applicant and hear from staff about these.
Yeah, let me ask you, Mr. Tedeschi, do you know if that's on another application, or would that be something that you would do?
So I'd have to defer to Mr. Ryan or Mr. Lenhart, although Mr. Haller and I were somewhat co-counsel on the Dewey project. I'm not sure what those improvements are. I don't have those in front of me. I would have a point of order question, perhaps. Again, this is a new process, and notwithstanding the fact we're using the prior subdivision ordinance from an adequacy perspective, there's an exception within section 24-1903 that requires us to use the adequacy requirements under the new subdivision regulations, for which we do have a certificate of adequacy already approved with conditions. So I don't know what I'll have to defer to Ms. Coleman in full disclosure on what the ability is now for the board to modify or amend those, even if we can. That being said, I'll have to defer to Mr. Lenhart or Mr. Ryan. I hate to put either one of them on the spot on that specific intersection and those specific crosswalks. I would imagine they are covered in some capacity, but I don't know, and I don't want to misrepresent.
So do we have Mr. Lenhart? Who's the other one you were suggesting?
So your staff person, Mr. Ryan, Benjamin Ryan.
Okay.
Yeah, this is Mike Lenhart. I'm here. Could you please repeat for me, Commissioner Dorner, exactly which movement you're speaking of?
Yeah, going east-west, crossing over Adelphi on the north side of that intersection.
So traveling east on Toledo to Adelphi.
Yeah.
And then crossing Adelphi.
Yeah, if you're just looking at that intersection right there as like almost a box, then on the south side, there's a crosswalk that's been improved. And on the west side of that intersection, there's a crosswalk leading from the library over to our community center that's been painted. On the north side of that intersection, there's not. And that's going to be a key kind of connection point for the multi-gen facility later on, as people are kind of crossing over the streets in both directions to get to that corner.
That was the crosswalk on the north leg was not included in anyone else's BPIS requirements, and those the BPIS comes with a cost cap, and when we start adding pedestrian crossings on another leg, it creates a snowball effect in terms of the design of the signal and construction, and it very quickly exceeds cost caps. So that leg was not included on anything I'm aware of.
Not necessarily putting in like the signal itself, because there's a signal facing the south side right there on the northwest corner. But how about just painting that so it would be a little bit safer as people are going across, because they cross on the north side still.
Understood. I understood. What we often hear from DPI is once we start to touch something where we're adding a painted crosswalk with their Vision Zero policy, they make us go all the way with the signal upgrades and everything that goes along with it, and it can have quite an impact.
And roughly how much would it cost if we were to do the north side of that intersection right there?
I'm not able really to answer that question. It's a good question, and I understand where you're going with this, but without having some of the details on what the current design is, where poles would need to be installed to meet ADA or requirements, or the crosswalks, ADA ramps, it's very difficult question to answer on the fly.
Yeah, fair enough. So can that be something before you guys come back for DSP? Could you look into that?
We could take a look at that, certainly.
So again, I hear Commissioner Dorner's line of questioning and understand. We would be happy to provide staff with information with respect to, so that they can have it for maybe future projects related to BPIS in and around the area. I feel that I have to kind of be clear for the record and understanding Commissioner Dorner's questioning and desires. We do have an approved ADQ with specific conditions for BPIS improvements. And I feel like that frames our requirements as it relates to this project. However, I do want to be responsive and work collaboratively with staff and offer Mike Lenhart to provide information as it may relate to what it would take in the future for that intersection. Perhaps staff could use that for future analysis and projects subject to a cost cap to make that improvement in the future.
And let's, Commissioner, let's hear from Ms. Connor and/or Mr. Ryan as well.
Thank you. Yes, this is Sherry Connor with the subdivision section for the record. Commissioner Dorner, I think I can assist a little bit further with your question. One of the great things about working virtually is that you have access to information at your fingertips. So I did pull up the Dewey East preliminary plan of subdivision project. It does have a condition, and I can read that for you. It does require improvements at that intersection as part of its BPIS requirements. And it does read that they must have those improvements bonded and permitted for construction prior to their first building permit, to improve the pedestrian facilities at the Toledo Road and Adelphi Road intersection with crosswalk restriping and upgrades to the ADA ramps and push buttons where necessary.
Okay, so would that cover all? So we've already got the south and the west side there. Would that cover the north side as well, do you think?
I would have to check the detail that's included in the record, but I just wanted to note that there were at that intersection, the pedestrian facilities were slated for improvement.
Okay,
if I recall correctly, that only had to do with the crosswalk on the west leg, the crossing Toledo Road. I was involved in that project as well, and I'm pretty sure that was only the improvements to the west leg to make it ADA compliant as far as the condition.
Okay. It doesn't specify that, but
yeah, I don't want to represent today that the Dewey is going to be making the crosswalk on the north leg because I don't believe that is the case.
Sounds like Mr. Haller got off too early today.
I could text him. No, I'm kidding.
Pleased with that. Okay,
Right,
so
Mr. Dorner.
yeah, so I don't know where we can go with that. If we can, because that intersection is really important. I understand that you have BPIS adequacy findings already in place, and that you've got improvements that you're going to slate for other crosswalks. But I think the proximate area that's most impacted by your development is right there, not up by Northwestern and other areas. And that would be the closest area to improve it. I don't know what the cost would be, and I don't want to drive you over your cost cap per se, but that would be, I think, the more appropriate places to be fixing things instead of something that's like half a mile away from your site. Because your residents are going to be walking around in that area a lot more than crossing over in front of Northwestern.
But I'm curious, if I can, Commissioner, I'm curious for staff's thoughts around that, because in part, the improvements are driven by what staff is pushing the applicant to do, right? So,
Sherry Connor again for the record. That's correct. The adequacy is actually required to be reviewed and approved prior to the preliminary plan coming before the planning board. And so that determination has already been made and approved in accordance with the regulations, which require it to be approved by the planning director. We do provide meetings with the applicant and scoping. The applicant does an analysis of the network gaps in the area and selects improvements that can be made within the cost cap to improve pedestrian and bicycle facility connections in the area. They did that in this case. Staff also coordinated with the city of Hyattsville on recommendations they may have had for those connections in the area. And we do base those recommendations and approval off of that analysis.
So to what extent do we have the ability to modify that? Because that was literally just done 9 days ago, maybe, or 10 days ago. So to what extent do we have the ability to modify that? Because in prior cases, we've had the option of choosing certain BPIS improvements. And I mean, I'll just be blunt. I don't really care about the crosswalk at Northwestern. If I'm looking at this case and I'm looking at crosswalks that we need to improve and connectivity that we need to improve, the priority is not up by Northwestern or farther up Delphi and other streets. It's right there at the intersection that's next to the property. And we should have an ability to adjust to VPIS. I don't want to like overrule the planning director's like ability to do that. That should always be an ability for us to substitute in items within the cost cap and within reason.
Mr. Chair.
Ms. Coleman, do you want to weigh in on this? Yeah, thanks.
Yes, Elisa Coleman, Senior Counsel for the record. The way that the new code is written, the DQ is determined by the planning director. Now, it can be appealed, but the appeal goes to the planning board. So therefore, the position of the office would be that the planning board can't unilaterally make revisions to that. It would have to be upon appeal.
But how are we signing away our authorities to the planning director before we can actually vote on something that we don't necessarily think is the right thing to do, or we don't think it's the highest priority to do? That just to me seems like I don't think we're getting rid of our powers for the planning director to necessarily always do that. If we have disagreements with certain things and we want to prioritize stuff, we should have that option.
I understand your concern, but operating within the code, that's what has essentially happened.
All right, those are the regs. I think Commissioner.
I mean, so can I lodge an appeal for that?
We can't appeal because it comes before us.
So who would appeal that?
Who has the right to appeal?
It would seem that the applicant.
And no one else?
That's correct.
So even if concerned citizens were to see this, they wouldn't be able to file an appeal and get a revision?
That's correct.
Yeah, I think we need to adjust that in the code. I don't know the process of how we would necessarily adjust it, but I think we need to revisit that, both in terms of the ability to appeal and then the ability of the planning board to actually make a decision. Because I'm not okay with decisions being made entirely by the planning director and us not having any opportunity to offer adjustments. And that's just a hard stop. Like, I don't think that I am giving away my ability to do that. Like, it's totally inappropriate.
Okay, we hear you.
So I have one other request then, based on this, but also related to this area. In the certificate of adequacy, there's a talk about ADA compliant pedestrian ramps. One of the places on this intersection, on the southeast corner of that intersection, we're leading into Wells Run, and the trail system right there. There's a very narrow stairway that leads down to the trails right there that I would like to see that become an ADA compliant ramp. I've asked for this for years to have that implemented, and that's very important to connecting this trail system over to this parcel. And that I think we should have as part of one of those ramps, should be that trail system right there, because it's right at the intersection where you have that crosswalk terminating on the south side, on the east side of Adelphi. The stairs need to be widened a little bit, or that passageway needs to be widened slightly, and then we need to have a ramp that goes down there so it's ADA compliant. Otherwise, you can't get up onto the street level if you're in a low lane bike, if you have a kid in a pull thing on the back of the bike, or if you're in a wheelchair and you're trying to get from the trail up onto Adelphi Road and to go across the parcel, or go the other way and go east onto the trail system. Would that fall within the ADA compliance that's in the adequacy?
I mean, if the question is can that be, I mean, I think we're addressing, I think the same issue. I don't think that there's anything that we can do about this if there's a certificate of adequacy. I wonder though, Mr. Tedesco, for you.
Certificate of adequacy as upgrading to ADA compliant pedestrian ramps. It doesn't say that it has to be the ramps leading off to the road. We could interpret that as being on the south side of that intersection, going from where that crosswalk is down to the trail as well. That's not specific in the adequacy.
Yeah. I mean, Ms. Coleman, maybe you can weigh in, but it feels like that there's not a lot we can do after the fact.
And I'm not even asking for after the fact, and to one extent I am before this, but the question I'm asking right now is on the certificate of adequacy, we're talking about the ADA pedestrian ramps, that to me is one of them.
The way that I'm looking at the Lisa Coleman Senior Counsel, again for the record, the way that I'm looking at the certificate of adequacy, condition 4A says along the south side of Toledo Road as detailed in Exhibit B2 of the applicant's BPIS submission, upgrade to 3 ADA compliant pedestrian ramps. So if that ramp isn't, or that area isn't identified in the applicant's Exhibit B2, it would imply that that would not be supported by this certificate of adequacy.
Can we have one of those 3 ramps be those stairs right there then?
Wouldn't be able to modify it from Exhibit B2.
Ms. Coleman, what condition did you reference?
I am looking at the certificate of adequacy condition 4A. I'm sorry, 4A1.
Thank you.
So do we have a copy of Exhibit B2 where we can look and see where those ADA ramps are located?
That's a question for staff or the applicant. I don't have that in front of me.
So do we know what ramps are referenced?
Mr. Lenhart could queue up and direct everybody to him, but the ramps in that condition, which is approved and beyond our appeal, I do not believe includes the area that Commissioner Dorner is referencing, if it's the property that I believe is across from the center that the commission owns on Adelphi Road, that property, which is owned by University Park. That area is not part of one of the three.
If I may, Commissioner Dorner, are you referring to, there's a trail on the east side of Adelphi Road within the public right-of-way? It's like a dedicated master plan right-of-way that is on the opposite side of where Toledo and Adelphi intersect at that signalized intersection. There's a little ramp that kind of goes, or maybe some stairs that goes down to that. Yeah, that's the sidewalk or trail.
Yeah,
it's like
a ramp. It's stairs, because I've actually tried to take my bike up those stairs and it's not easy.
Sure.
And that's what I wanted to get fixed. And it's not hard. I mean, it's just a couple of stairs that the grading wouldn't be that bad to put in a ramp, just to make sure people can get up and down that area.
So let me suggest, Commissioner Dorner, I think, let us work with our own Department of Parks and Recreation. Let us work with the town of University Park, and let us see if we can bring enough attention to this to get this issue resolved, because it does feel that it's not, even though it's adjacent, it's not pertinent to what's before us, unfortunately. So I think there are other ways that we can solve this problem. I hear you loud and clear, but it does not sound, and we're hearing advice from our legal counsel as well, that we don't have a lot of authority to connect this issue to this case.
So I think I would just disagree that it's not pertinent. It is completely pertinent to this parcel. You're not going to get a parcel besides the library or our multi-gen facility that are going to be more adjacent to this. So in terms of, and pertinent, if you're looking in the case and it's talking about pedestrian traffic and walking around in the TDDP and the TDOZ kind of areas, that's exactly it. Like, you're trying to get people to go east-west and to walk around and bike around, and we're trying to have ADA compliance. We don't have it right there. Like, we're talking about BPIS improvements that were signed off all the way up Northwestern that are far away from this area. If we want to actually impact and have a nexus to the site and to actually impact things that the people who are living there are going to use, it's right there, because they're going to go east-west and they're going to go across this path all the way over to the Whole Foods and the Cape Ridge development over there, maybe get onto our trail system on the other side and use the parks. If we really want to have pavement, if we really want movement, like, that's the area we should be improving.
I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just suggesting that this is probably a conversation between us and our planning director to figure out how these kinds of decisions are getting made, because I'm not hearing that there's anything we can do about it connected to this case at this point.
So let me ask then, either Mr. Leonard or Mr. Tedesco, would you be willing to check into that and actually improve that as a part of this project? So I think it's low hanging fruit. It's not going to cost you a whole lot, and it's right there. And that would be something that would be, to me, extremely nice to do with this development.
Mm-hmm.
And I like the development. I think it's a great idea. It's a good location. It's the right timing for this. Like, there's a lot of benefits to it. I'm just looking at the small details, and it just bothers me when we have disconnectivity on this. And I'm sure Mr. Tedesco, you can remember back to Metro 2 when I asked about a sidewalk that was just not complete and not paved over there. And that took me 1.5 years to get fixed after the fact. And this is one of those other things that I think would be really good to just finish out a project really nicely.
I'm happy to commit both my services and Mr. Lenhart's services as it relates to whatever we can do from the private sector to assist your desires and staff, as well as working with University Park. But unfortunately, I'm not in a position to proffer that as it relates to this particular development project, given the fact that I don't know what this, I mean, it's low-lying fruit, as you say. I don't know that to be true. I don't know what the grades are. I don't know how much is involved for ADA. I don't know what that would do to our cost cap. And I don't think we have the ability to further amend our BPIS. So this would be a proffer above and beyond anything that's required by law or code. And not to say we're not trying to be cooperative and or facilitating as much as we can. If there is a program in place or something that we could work together on, we absolutely will and do. But at some point, I have to. I'm not in a position to proffer something that I don't know what I'm actually proffering, because I don't know what's all involved in cost. It's not been engineered. It's not been surveyed. It's in the right of way of, I presume, University Park. What funding and mechanisms do they have in place for these types of improvements? I don't know. There's a lot of unanswered questions that prevent me from just saying yes. And I don't want to overpromise and underdeliver, and I don't want to run afoul of the law. So I'm trying to be responsive, and I do applaud your efforts and was a part of your efforts with respect to that sidewalk along 410, and I know exactly what you're referring to, and I remember our conversations on that. In as much as we can continue to work collaboratively on this for that particular improvement that you've identified, Mr. Lenhart and I absolutely will do that. But I think at this point with this project, the parameters of the law that we now find ourselves in with the new code, I'm in the same boat that you are. The code says what the code says, and we have to abide by it.
So would it help if we were to go ahead and take a momentary break and go into item 9 to come back, so that way you can talk with Mr. Lenhart about it?
I don't think so, Commissioner Dorner.
All right, so I'll go ahead and I'll move.
I don't know what legal basis I have to even agree to such a proffer.
So, all right, then, Mr. Chair, I'd like to move that we continue case the PPS 4-22004 to a future date. We're still within the mandatory action limit, and that would give the applicant an initial time to confer with staff and find out a little more details about this.
I mean, respectfully, Commissioner Dorner, I would not support that. I think we find another way to solve this problem. I don't feel that it's appropriate to tie this to this case. My use of the word pertinent was wrong, because clearly it's pertinent to the case in terms of the impact on the community. It's just that their certificate of adequacy is already approved. Respectfully, I would not support that, but I'm 100% committed to solving this problem.
So you could vote that way, that's fine. I would still like staff to take more time to look at this, and then we can come back and review the case. So I'll call the vote if we have a second on it.
Yeah, was that a motion?
Yeah, that's a motion that I made.
I do second.
So we have a motion by Commissioner Dorner, a second by Vice Chair Bailey. Discussion on the motion. And so the motion is to continue the case, or to continue the separate out a one item from the case for us to take up later. I'm not understanding.
I'm just to continue the case. I don't think there's a whole lot that we'll have to necessarily rehash on this. But I'll make the motion just to continue the preliminary plan and subdivision, just in case there's other stuff that come up.
Okay, so there's a motion to continue the case. The motion is by, again, Commissioner Dorner, second by Vice Chair Bailey. Discussion on the motion. You're on mute, Commissioner Giraldo.
Can we continue it until when?
I think we'd have to probably turn to the plan. If we vote yes, then we'd have to probably turn to the planning board chair's office to see what the dates would be. When adequate time would be needed. And we could do it for 2 weeks from now, or 3 weeks, whatever it might end up being.
Mr. Hunt, you have any thoughts about this?
Chairman,
I'm just thinking about in terms of schedule, not about our policy, but in terms of the schedule.
Absolutely. At this point in time, I think the earliest we could potentially look at is April the 6th. If not that date, then we're looking into probably April the 27th.
May I be heard?
Let's continue to discuss, Mr. Tedesco, let's continue the discussion. So hold your thought for a moment. I mean, let me say, I absolutely hear what you're saying, but I don't. My read on this case is, I think it's a great project, and I'm looking forward to moving forward. And I think we can solve these issues relatively easily through another mechanism, and I'm fully committed to making sure that happens. So I just don't want to tie them up on this.
Chair Shapiro?
Yeah, Commissioner, Mr. Warner.
David
Principal
Warner,
Counsel.
Principal Counsel. I just, the motion should include, it wasn't clear to me in the discussion what this matter was being continued for what purpose. I think Ms. Coleman made it very clear that the decisions made as part of the certificate of adequacy are final, and they are not subject to consideration by this board. But if there's other matters for continuation, okay, but matters that were determined in the certificate of adequacy process are final. They've been approved by the planning director.
And my apologies, Mr. Chairman. It's actually April 13th is the soonest date.
Okay. My understanding, and Commissioner Jordan, correct me if I'm wrong, my understanding is what this would be continuance for is for the applicant to consider amending their consider whether they would proffer this. Is that what you're asking?
Yes, that'd be one of the things. I think there's a number of items that have come up in the last half hour where I've just heard, I'm not sure, we don't know. And this would give staff a number of opportunities to connect with the applicant, figure those out. The applicant said that they weren't sure about the cost and whether or not it would be something that would be possible to swap in or swap out. We don't know about the north side of that intersection. There's a number of things that we just don't know about. And I would like to use the opportunity to have staff connect with Parks and Recreation, because I don't think they, I don't know if they were necessarily involved on the multi-gen site right there for impact. And I would also like an opportunity for the city of Hyattsville to potentially see if they can come to terms with the applicant and with staff on issues, because I think there's a couple of disagreements that are still kind of pending there. And that would give everyone involved an opportunity to potentially think a little bit harder on the case.
Mr. Chairman, I know you're in discussion, but I feel compelled. I'd like to be heard.
Sure, Mr. Teske, go ahead.
With the utmost respect to Commissioner Dorner, and I hear him very clearly, but we've already continued this case once for all the reasons that Commissioner Dorner just referenced. With respect to the conditions at the city, I don't believe there is any debate any further, at least not from the applicant's perspective, with some of the conditions, and neither from your staff's perspective. They've analyzed all those. We've analyzed it. We provided our written responses in the record with respect to some of the city conditions. Majority of those will be taken up with the detailed site plan. I'm still confused on any sua sponte request by the board to continue this case to further examine it and what sounds like reconsider final decisions and conditions from an ADQ. I think is inappropriate and not supported in law. I get it. It's a new zoning ordinance. We're all administering it for the first time as we go. This isn't the first ADQ case or preliminary plan under that utilized the prior subdivision regulations, but was subject to the ADQ requirements. There's no legal basis, with the utmost respect, there's no legal basis for us to continue this case to reconsider BPIS. We don't make the law, you don't make the law, but we have to follow it. We may not like it sometimes. Citizens may not like it sometimes, but it's the law. The council is what enacted this. So we are bound by it. And so I don't see how a continuance that's already been continued once to further look at conditions of approval that are final get us anywhere.
So that's fine. I appreciate the comments, Mr. Tedesco, but we just heard a couple of things today that were still uncertain. And even if we had a continuance already, there's still some things that weren't known today. So I would appreciate the opportunity to have a bit more clarity on those.
Chair Shapiro?
Yes, sir.
David Warner, Principal Counsel. The procedural process for further evaluation of the items that were part of the adequacy analysis would require, one, continuation of this hearing, and then two, a request by the applicant to appeal the decision of the planning director. There would be no other way for this board to consider the issues that have been decided in the certificate of adequacy. So you could continue this case and give the applicant an opportunity to appeal the planning director's decision, but it wouldn't bring the matter before you unless there was such an appeal filed.
So we would be continuing the case to give the applicant the opportunity to appeal if he so choose, if they so choose.
Exactly.
Appeal to who?
To the planning board. The planning director's final decisions on certificates of adequacy can be appealed by the applicant to the planning board.
Only by the applicant.
Only by the
applicant. So, Mr. Warner, what you're saying is that if we continue it, then the applicant has the option, if it chooses, to appeal. What exactly is are they appealing? The continuance?
No, they would. So what has been decided are the bicycle and ped improvements that that are adequate to serve this project. And it sounds to me like the disagreement is with what improvements have been determined to be necessary to serve this project. And so the process for challenging the final decision of the planning director allows the applicant to appeal the decision. And then that decision on the certificate of adequacy would come before the planning board, and you would hear that first, and then you would hear the rest of this case. But the only way it would come before the board is if the applicant appealed the decision.
Okay, so if the applicant decides they don't want to appeal,
then it doesn't come before you. And I know we've had this discussion previously, and it is a new process that was established by the adoption of the new subdivision regulations by the district council. And they determined that adequacy determinations can be made by the planning director, and that decision will be final. And the only appeal was offered to the applicant if they didn't like what the planning director decided. And so that's the way the law was written, and we obviously
and so
carry out
I
the law.
do want to correct something that we talked about before, because we did not give away our authority. The district council made these rules.
Right, the district council, exactly, passes the law, we administer the law, exactly.
Right. So there is a motion before us, okay? So discussion of the motion. With all respect, Commissioner Warner Dorner, and I will bend over backwards to support each of you when there's something you feel really strongly about. But in this case, I think this is not a healthy direction for us to go based upon the law. And so I won't be supporting this. I do want to solve the problem that you have taken up, clear as day. I'm not going to let that go. But in terms of the process, I don't think it's appropriate for us to continue this hearing based upon something that's so completely out of our control. So if there's no further discussion on this, I am going to call the roll.
I've just one question, Mr. Chair. I have one question because it's still not clear to me. So if we grant a continuance and the applicant doesn't appeal, and it's solely within the applicant, so then we come back and we're faced with the same thing. Is that what I'm hearing?
We're the exact same place. Right, that's right.
So just under further discussion, I just also want to request that staff catch up with, on the planning side, catch up with people on the park side, on Parks and Recreation, about the multi-gen facility right there. Because I don't know if they've been incorporated into this process, or they would have concerns as well, or could provide kind of more insights into there. So if we do continue it, then that would be one of the other things that would like to happen as well.
And I would say, I'm with you, and I appreciate this comment. I think no matter what happens here, I'm looking forward to that conversation happening between our two sides. I don't tie that to this case right here, but I think that those communications can be much better. And I'll using my authority, I'll make sure that happens. Continue discussion.
I got it now. So, Commissioner Dorner, so what you want our staff, the planning board staff, to talk to Parks and Rec. But even if Parks and Rec comes up with something, we already have a certificate of adequacy, so I don't know how that can be changed. That's the,
Yes.
I understand exactly what you're talking about, and I think I'm a big fan of what you're speaking of, but I don't know how we get to where you want to go by the continuance, since it's the applicant's choice to continue. And even if the Parks and Rec speak with our staff and they say, oh yeah, maybe that would be a good idea, but the certificate of adequacy has already been done.
Yeah, so I don't disagree that we have the certificate of adequacy in place. It's still up to Mr. Tedesco later on, or the applicant, to decide if they would like to appeal that during the time frame. This also gives staff an opportunity to actually dig a little deeper, because I asked a couple of questions today about intersection improvements around that area. We weren't sure who was supposed to be doing that, or what should exactly be done. And we didn't even know on the certificate of adequacy for the exhibit that it references, we didn't even know about whether or not the ramps actually could be interpreted as referring to the trail or not. So I think there are a couple of questions that are details and it's nitty gritty, but these are things that I would like to know, that the continuance would allow us an opportunity to have more information that we didn't have today at the case. And it would give the applicant the ability to appeal if they would like to do so.
Okay, I'm wondering whether or not this could be handled at the specific design plan stage.
I think, let me just suggest, I think Commissioner Dorner is crystal clear with where he's coming from, and I think we just have a decision to make. So, and I hear you, Commissioner Giraldo, but I'm not sure that our continued discussion on this is going to move Commissioner Dorner, because he's being as transparent as possible. It's crystal clear where he's coming from. So with that, let me see if there's any further discussion on this. There's no further discussion. I will call the roll. This is for the continuance. I'll start with you, Commissioner Dorner.
Vote yes.
Let me go second, and I'm going to vote no. Commissioner Giraldo.
I vote no on the continuance, since my rationale is that I don't see, we're just going to be delaying it, and I don't see where we can get where Commissioner Dorner wants to get, and which I would like to get there also, but I don't think that procedurally we can accomplish that. So I would vote no.
Vice Chair Bailey.
I agree with you, Mr. Giraldo, but I'm going to vote yes.
So it's 2-2, so the motion does not pass. So we are back to the hearing before us. Thank you, everybody. And Commissioner Dorner, know that this issue is not going away anytime soon, and I will be a champion with you on this issue, okay? Sure. So let's continue. We have heard from the applicant. I assume we don't need to hear anything else from the applicant at this moment. We do have other folks who signed up to speak, so let's go back to our process. We have representatives from the city of Hyattsville, Mr. Chandler, Ms. Simmons. I think, and anybody correct me if I'm wrong, that's where we are in the process, right? Yeah, okay.
Who knows?
I know.
Yes,
exactly.
Mr. Chairman, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. So, Mr. Chandler, Ms. Simmons, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, Chairman Shapiro, members of the board. For the record,
Mr. Chandler, for what it's worth, we only see you from the nose down.
Oh,
there we go.
Okay.
Much better.
Okay.
Nothing wrong with your nose down, but this is better.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Chairman. For the record, Jim Chandler representing the city of Hyattsville. So the city is here to support the applicant's preliminary plan of subdivision application in the findings of the staff report. The city, the applicant led by Mr. Tedesco and your staff have spent a great deal of time discussing the conditions for approval that you're considering today. While we're certainly grateful that there is consensus around the majority of these conditions, there were two conditions that were proffered by the city for which we have not developed consensus. We are aware of the opinion that it's appropriate for the board to accept these conditions as requirements of approval. The Prince George's Plaza TDD specifically identifies transportation and mobility policies as pivotal to advancing the goals of the TDDP. The plan's transportation management strategies specifically identify the collaboration of major property owners to bring capital bike share to the transit district to facilitate connectivity within the last mile of Metro, and the provision of bicycle racks and specifically bicycle facilities meeting the size and use specifications of this project. While we've invested a great deal of time discussing the merits of items such as parking for single occupancy vehicles, it's important to remember that the focus within the TDDP is to enable opportunities for pedestrians and non-motorized vehicle uses. On page 19 of the staff report, the city has requested condition 5. It's a condition requiring the dedication of public use easement for the specific purpose of enabling the city, the county, or a bike facility operator to install a bike share station at this location. If it is determined that a location is not viable for bike share station, the condition permits the city to install public bicycle racks at this location. Dedication of easement creates no financial or other undue burden of the applicant, nor does it require the placement of infrastructure, as it would be at the discretion of the city, the county, or the bike share operator. The board has previously made such conditions a requirement at time of preliminary plan of subdivision, notably a 2018 resolution 4-17007 for Landy development located adjacent to the subject site. While this is neither a BPS or PPS requirement, this condition appears to enable and support the condition 3 of the certificate of adequacy. There appears to be no restriction that would limit the board's ability to require the applicant to dedicate an area within the project site for public use easement. Lastly, we certainly sympathize with Commissioner Dorner's frustration regarding the process for review and approval of certificate of adequacy. Yes, the process is new. We recognize there will be growing pains, but we also concur with the assessment that several of the approved certificate of adequacy improvements fail to directly or indirectly benefit users of the subject site. We respectfully request the application of this consideration by the board. Thank you for your consideration. I will defer to my colleague, Ms. Simmons, to discuss the city's other condition.
Thank you, Ms. Chandler. Ms. Simmons?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the board. For the record, Holly Simmons, City Planner with the City of Hyattsville. To briefly add to Mr. Chandler's remarks, in particular, I'll be speaking to 2 of the city's requested conditions, which we have listed in our letter to the Planning Board as 3A and 4. So the city's condition 3A pertains to the provision of pedestrian facilities along Democracy to the east and Constitution Drive to the south. Pedestrian circulation and connection is of paramount importance to the city, which recognizes that these improvements are necessary to ensure the pedestrian safety and walkability of this transit-oriented development. We understand the building is intended to be oriented to the east toward Democracy Avenue, and the applicant has stated that they will install sidewalks along a portion of Democracy, and they will not be able to provide sidewalks to, through, and across Constitution. The city believes it's important to address this issue prior to DSP as such, we have suggested in the language of the condition 2 options that could be considered. We request the board consider adopting the city's condition 3A, but if this is not included as a condition of approval, we ask that it be listed as a finding. The city's condition 4 pertains to parking. Given the existing structure's current use as a dedicated parking garage, its location within the transit district, and the proposed retention of 727 parking spaces on site, it is important to address parking to some extent at this time. The TDDP limits the maximum number of off-street residential parking for this development to 1.25 spaces per dwelling unit, or 261 total spaces. The applicant's parking analysis demonstrates that both University Town Center and the parking garage itself will be overparked, even with the reduction in parking and increase in demand generated by the proposed development. And further notice that the parking counts in the analysis were conducted during a time when the peak parking demand for the garage was inflated, resulting in in a conservative estimate of surplus parking. So the applicant will determine the allocation of residential versus public parking within the garage at the time of DSP. The city requests that if the applicant proposes development that will exceed the maximum parking ratios at that time, they be required to provide a comprehensive transportation demand management strategy and program as outlined in the city's condition 4 and as consistent with the requirements of the TDDP. And that concludes my comments.
Thank you, Ms. Simmons. Thank you, Mr. Chandler. Commissioners, questions for the city of Hyattsville?
Yeah, I have a question actually for both, each of them, to ask the questions. Mr. Chandler, for the bike share, why is the city asking for a bike share right there? Because if you go like 300 feet east to where the new library is on Adelphi, there's a Capital Bike Share station right there.
Yes.
So what, and that's not even utilized all the time. That very often is like half empty. So what would be the purpose of having a bike share there? I'm not necessarily opposed to the idea of having bike racks there outside of the building, but what would be the purpose of having a bike share there as opposed to like putting it maybe on like a multi-gen site when that comes in, or somewhere like farther up on Adelphi or elsewhere in Toledo?
Yeah, Councilmember, I think it's an excellent question. One is there's no certainty, right? Certainly in best case scenario, there's development northeast of the site and a multi-gen center is built, and it includes a Capital Bike Share station or some form or fashion. But the reality is when we assess projects and put a great deal of effort to ensure there is adequacy and adjacency for parking spaces for motorized vehicles, that is an area of focus, and we would never require someone to walk 300 feet for their car. So we're looking at bicycle facilities in that same way. The applicant will be delivering several hundred residential dwelling units. We're of the belief that those users should have the benefit of having a shared bike station at the ground floor as they exit the building. We think it's appropriate. We think it's in line with the goals of the TDDP, and we anticipate it to be well utilized. Between this site and the properties to the north, we will have several 100 new users within steps of this site. We think it's a great opportunity for dedication of an easement to allow for that bike share station. And if it's determined there is not a need for that bike share station, bike racks would certainly be a suitable and acceptable alternative. The request is not for the applicant to provide this infrastructure. It is for the applicant to provide a dedication of easement.
Okay. Okay. So that last clarification I think is a little bit easier than.
Yes.
That's what I missed. I must have not heard that part of it. So thank you. And then for Ms. Simmons, in terms of the request on the minimum parking, should we be taking that up at DSP instead of like right now the preliminary plan? And it's fine to raise it now, so that way it's on the radar and stuff. But would that be something that would be more appropriate at DSP as opposed to now?
Parking is something that will be raised and reviewed fully at time of DSP. However, we think given the special circumstances of this site, the fact that it is a structured parking garage currently and half of the parking is proposed to be retained along with its location within the transit district itself, it raises it to a level of importance that with this particular preliminary plan, some framework for addressing it at time of DSP is desired by the city. And I will say that the condition that we have proposed starts with if. So there is a world in which the applicant at time of DSP does not propose to exceed the parking maximums for the residential parking, in which case this condition would be a moot point. There's a world in which they propose less than that 1.25 parking spaces per dwelling unit. Again, it's a moot point at that time. I think our concern, just given the amount of parking that is proposed to be retained on site, it's understanding that if they do propose to exceed it, there will be something in place to address that, specifically a transportation demand management program.
Right. Other questions?
Yeah, actually,
Go ahead,
the one question I forgot to ask that was kind of sitting in the back of my mind. On the Constitution Drive, the to, through, and across kind of improvements for bike and pedestrian access, did you raise that for consideration when we were before the certificate of adequacy was finalized?
Commissioner, yeah, if that is to the city, yes. In part, and again, this is it's a unique circumstance in what are we considering democracy? You know, it's our understanding that the as part of the DSP, the applicant will provide a pedestrian entrance at Toledo. But the fact of the matter is the frontage being redeveloped faces democracy. And so for our perspective, until it is determined that Toledo will be the frontage of the building and not democracy, that some level of pedestrian enhancements are necessary for democracy. Now, if through the DSP, the applicant is able to demonstrate that democracy will not be the frontage, that Toledo will be the frontage, it may be a moot point where it may be something of grave importance, but we're operating under one assumption that it can't be proven until there is a DSP in front of the board.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Other questions? So let me say from my perspective, and we have no one else signed up to speak on this besides City of Hyattsville. So I'm very sensitive to much of what the city is bringing up. I think that there's a difference in interpretation about when the appropriate time to bring some of these things to us. The staff has been crystal clear, and I don't see staff disagreeing a whole lot with what the city is saying. It's more a question of when it's appropriate to bring this to us. What was considered for the certificate of adequacy, that's not what's before us. And there are a number of items here that staff is saying are more appropriately brought to us at the time of detailed site plan. I really am inclined to follow staff's recommendation on this, their interpretation on this. Even if the city disagrees with some of those interpretations, our staff is telling us clear as day that this is not the appropriate time for these. So many of the issues that cities bring up are already either reflected in some of our conditions or will be considered a detailed site plan. But again, nothing that I'm hearing from the city is anything staff disagrees with. It's just a question of timing. So with that, folks, I'm curious if there's any other questions for the city of Hyattsville on this. Thank you all very much. And then there's nobody else speaking to us on this issue. We have heard from the applicant. We have heard from staff. We've heard from the city of Hyattsville. I will close this evidentiary hearing and I will turn it back over to you. Colleagues, what is your pleasure on this issue?
Mr. Chair, I move that we adopt the findings of staff and approve preliminary plan of subdivision PPS 4-22004, as well as the type 1 tree conservation plan TCP 1-007-2023 with the as well as the conditions of staff with the findings and conditions as modified by applicant's exhibit number 1.
Second.
We've got a motion by Commissioner Geraldo, second by Vice Chair Bailey. Discussion on the motion.
So I'll just add under discussion for staff when we get to the detailed site, assuming this passes and gets through. If it does, and we get to the DSP, if you can take to heart the city of Hyattsville's recommendations. Personally, I don't think I agree with how Mr. Chandler depicted the not walking more than 300 feet for a car. I walk a lot more for bikes around in this area, but maybe I'm a little bit of an outlier there. I don't know if we necessarily need a Capital Bike Share right there, because I think there are other locations. There's a couple in that area that are really close that are just completely underutilized. I do think that having parking outside the building for people who are visiting would be really good to have in terms of the spaces and stuff. So for that reason, I think the easement consideration and the DPS would be good. And then also just want to make sure flagging the where the building fronts on, I think is an important point to having the ADA compliance for folks who are living there and are visiting the building. And then the minimum parking, yeah, probably like 8 or 9 years ago, I was involved in the TDDP for this area. And so it kind of sends signals back to lots and lots of public hearings thinking about like how age. And parking was always a big issue that came up. And we had way too much in this TDDP. So if you can also take that into consideration in terms of how we're going to be dealing with it, particularly item 4 that's in the staff report on page 19 in terms of what the city of Hyattsville had recommended. I think that's great. It's not to say that the other recommendations aren't good, but I particularly honed in on those prior to the case, and then those are the ones that they actually emphasized today. So I just want to make sure that we don't forget that when we get to the DSP.
Fair enough. I think staff hears you loud and clear, and I concur. Okay, any further discussion on the motion? I will call the roll. Vice Chair Bailey, you made the motion, right?
No, I did.
Oh, Commissioner Giraldo. Okay, I'll start with you, Commissioner Giraldo. How do you vote?
I vote aye.
Vice Chair Bailey.
I vote aye.
One of those days. Commissioner Dorner. Say again.
All right, vote aye.
Thank you. I vote aye as well. The ayes have it 4-0. Thank you, everybody. Mr. Tedesco, staff, City of Hyattsville. Thanks, everybody, for your time on this matter. More to discuss for sure. Folks, we have one more item on our agenda. I am under a time crunch, and I have asked staff if it's okay to postpone the historic grants program award recommendations. There's nothing time sensitive about that, so they've agreed to do that. So we'll take that up at our next meeting. So there are no further items before us that I'm aware of. Mr. Hunt, any other business that you need to bring to us?
Mr. Chairman, that concludes all planning board items for today. Vice Chair Bailey, you are absolutely correct.
I was answering for you.
It sounds like we have no further business before us. Without objection, we are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
All right, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you. Bye-bye.